The spring of 2003 was one of the wettest and coldest on record along the eastern seaboard. Purple martin populations suffered due to the fact that the birds were unable to feed on their normal diet of flying insects. The early arriving birds, or scouts, got hit especially hard. Some colonies lost all their birds when it rained for 6 days straight in mid-May, with temperatures getting no higher than the low 50s. Even landlords who fed their martins lost a percentage of their birds. Emergency feeding is a viable option for landlords who want to help their martins get through the periods of so-called martin-killing weather. This video was filmed entirely on location at the colony of Tim Shaheen, a PMCA mentor and martin bander who lives in central New Jersey along the Navesink River.
This year, in the spring of 2003, we had a very poor spring to begin with. Below average temperatures, a lot of rain. We even had a snowstorm in April. And this year, on May 21st, it began to rain, and it continued to rain for 6 days straight. And the birds were already in a weakened condition. So after the third or fourth day of this steady rain, the birds all along the east coast of New Jersey, from Virginia right up into Rhode Island, they begin to starve and die. 4 or 5 days without food, a martin becomes so weak that it can't fly. This is the beginning of the end for many martins. They can't fly, they can't eat. The timing of this bad weather was right as the adult migration had pretty much finished and the sub-adult migration was just beginning. In June of 1972, Hurricane Agnes moved up the east coast and stalled over Pennsylvania. It rained for 3 weeks straight, and all the martins, adults and nestlings, perished. Martin landlords stood by and watched helplessly as their martins starved. In the late 90s, some proactive landlords got a group of starving martins to eat tossed crickets using a slingshot. Now, many landlords have trained their martins to feed on tossed food and food placed on raised platforms to supplement their natural feeding whenever the weather turns bad. The PMCA put out an alert on the forum to be prepared to feed hungry martins. I learned how to get martins to feed on food offered to them by posting questions on the forum and in the PMCA's magazine, The Update. PMCA has a great website. It's so user-friendly, has so much information on here. It has the scout report. You can check the northern migration of the martins in the spring. It's got their catalog is online. You can buy live crickets and mealworms for overnight delivery. The Martin Mentor program is on there. You can find a Martin Mentor in your area to help you with any of your questions. One of the best things I like about their website is the forum, and what that is Martin landlords all over the country post questions, and they get their questions answered by other Martin landlords. I had a question about how to cook scrambled eggs to feed the martins, and Mary Dawn's song was back to me within an hour, answered my question. Just great. Some landlords, including myself, have trained their martins to eat tossed live crickets, tossed mealworms, and even scrambled eggs. The martins have to be trained how to do this, and you can't wait until they're already in a very weak condition, because at that point it's too late. They most likely can't even fly. What you have to do is, after a day or two of bad weather, when you know the martins are hungry and they're sitting on their house, you have to then train them to take tossed food. Once you train them to eat tossed crickets, then they'll take tossed mealworms, they'll take tossed scrambled eggs. This can all be done with a slingshot or a plastic spoon, any method to get that food airborne. It doesn't have to be very high. It only has to be 2 or 3 feet above your head, and the martins will swarm all around your head. They'll come in, they'll start cycling and go into a flying pattern in sync with your tossing of the food. So as you're tossing the food, you have martins coming up from behind, and just as my hand goes up in the air, I'll feel a martin come by, almost brush my ears as it goes past my head. Wants to get that food just as it's leaving my hand. Now what I'd like to demonstrate now is how to get your birds to take the initial cricket. Obviously, birds have to be outside, so if it's a rainy day, rustle them up, get them outside, get them so they're back on the house sitting there. Start off by placing one cricket in the slingshot and loft it in a high arc over the martins' heads, out in front of them so they can see it. Continue tossing crickets until the first martin takes one. It may take 12 or 24 crickets before the first bird goes. Then the rest of the martins will join in the feeding. The crickets don't have to be alive. In fact, it's easier to handle crickets that have been put in the refrigerator until dormant or frozen. When the crickets arrive, put the entire box in the freezer overnight. The next day, take them out and put them in Ziploc bags for future use. It is important that you thaw the crickets to room temperature prior to feeding your martins. Another great way to feed your martins, once you have them trained to eat crickets and mealworms and scrambled eggs, is to use a feeding platform. PMCA sells what they call a bed and breakfast out of their catalog, and it's got 4 compartments. One compartment is for crushed oyster and eggshells, which the martins need for grit and calcium. Another compartment is for the nesting materials. Another compartment is for the mud that the martins may use in the nest building process. And the last compartment is for food, crickets, mealworms, and scrambled eggs. The scrambled eggs are very high in protein, higher than crickets and mealworms. It takes a while to train your martins to eat scrambled eggs. At first, they won't accept them. If they think it's a cricket in the air, they'll grab it and spit it right out. Or they'll look at it and won't even pick it up. But after 1 or 2 martins tries the egg and tastes it, then they all will start, and it turns out that they love scrambled eggs. Feeding your martins with a platform has pluses and negatives. A negative is you don't know how much of the food is being consumed by other birds, such as this male red-winged blackbird shown feeding here. A plus to using a platform is that some martins, such as those sitting on eggs, away from the colony, or less aggressive, will not get any food during a tossing session. That is why both tossing and platform feeding should be used together. One method complements the other. Mary Dawn Song's recipe, which I got off the forum, is six fresh eggs, large eggs, half a cup of water in a ceramic bowl, beat them up real good, and then cook them in a microwave. It takes about 5 or 6 minutes, but you don't want to do it all in one shot. You want to do it 2 minutes at first, mix them up, put them back in another minute and a half, take them out, mix them up, and then keep doing it in 30-second intervals until the egg is nice and fluffy. Now I'm going to take the egg out. It's all chopped up, bite-sized pieces. I'm going to take it out and put it in the feeder. It's very wise after you've had heavy rains, especially wind-driven rain, to inspect all your housing for wet nesting material. So what I do is, after heavy rain, I will lower all my housing, preferably when the birds are gone feeding. Lower all the housing, check each compartment, visually feel it with your hand, and if it's soaking wet, pull all that wet material out of there and rebuild the nest with nice dry pine needles or leaves, whatever you normally use in your nest. That'll give them a nice, dry, warm bed to sleep in at night, just like a human being. If you're out in the cold all day, the last thing you want is to come home and get into a soaking wet bed. Once you have your martins trained to eat tossed food, it's a good idea to keep up the program throughout the season. If you have a rainy day, a day when you know that the birds can't feed, it's very smart to get out there and toss them some food. It'll help them with the egg laying process. It'll help them conserve energy. It'll help them so that when the bugs do start flying, they don't have to worry so much about feeding themselves. They can get on the business of feeding their babies. I lost about 24 birds out of my colony. It was probably 60 birds when this poor weather hit. And I'm happy to say that even though I lost those 24 birds, new birds have come in and filled in, and I'm probably back up to 50 to 60 birds again, as are my friends who also fed. They all lost birds, but their colonies are still there, and their colonies are going to help fill in the voids for the other landlords that weren't wise to feed. And all I can say is, I learned a lot this season, and I hope that we can pull some good out of all this devastation.
Messages. Tim, this is Chuck. I'm at work. I just wanted to call and give you some good news. I thought I was really devastated with these birds here, but this morning turned out pretty good. I went out and fed them even though it's nice. Counted maybe 18 to 20 birds, which I was only seeing 5 or 6, but that was like unbelievable this morning, so I was really happy about that. Wanted to let you know.
Oh my goodness, look at them.
They're about 2 days. They're maybe 2 days. They're maybe 2 days old.
Look how tiny they are. Look at that, Eamon. Oh. This one was already banned. Okay.
The ones that are banned, that way we don't get them mixed up.
You getting comfortable holding them?
Oh, so
Very
cute.
gentle.